Hello.
Good evening.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Just please state your name.
My name is Ray Cerrone. I'm from Jefferson Solutions. I did some work for the city on valuing their other post-employment benefits other than pension and presented a report to the finance department probably back in January or February. And they've asked me to come here tonight to review the report with you and to answer any questions that you might have. Significant to notice the retiree count of 792. So you have 792 folks that are actually retired. You have more retired workers than you do active workers at this point. And so, demographically speaking, this is something that as a society we've been talking about for a long time. The pyramid is being supported by less workers. So that's significant, and that's why one of the reasons why the liability is so high.
I know you're not familiar with the state of Rhode Island, but a community the size of Warwick, once that is reflected on our financial statements, based on your rough calculations, I'm not holding you exact, that should have a significant impact, would it not, as to our financial standing?
The reality is the report reflects the amount that would show. It's very material.
But in a city that relies on interim funding, whether it be for bonds for particular projects or funding to pay bills until tax collections are made, things of that nature, I think the disclosure on a financial statement is going to have an impact on the interest rate or lendability to a party or an institution that discloses something like that.
Well, my opinion is it's already disclosed in the notes to your financial statements. If somebody reads, they're going to see that $263 million. The face of the financial statements gets a little more attention when it's right there in your statement of assets. So I think you could be right. If a shrewd underwriter would know that nothing's really changed.
Especially if there's not a fund set up to deal with that unfunded liability.
Correct.
If you're going on a cash basis method of addressing your expenditures, that can't look too healthy to anyone examining your financial records.
Agreed. But, even prior to the implementation of these accounting standards, those liabilities existed. We just didn't recognize them.
Right. What would you say a significant initial amount would be as an initial funding? The recommendations that were given at this seminar were whatever you can afford, or if, establish it and then build on it year after year. But dealing with our significant liability, as you've pointed out, so that we can plan accordingly ahead, can you throw a figure at me approximately based on?
I'd be happy to throw a number at you. I'd also, before I do, just as a point of clarification, the OPEB trust, I think, is a fantastic idea. Primarily, like you're saying, you're aggregating effort, you're centralizing it to one administrative unit. And then in addition to that, we're talking $250,000 was the sample figure that we had talked about earlier. If you just invested that money by yourself, you're going to get 1%. If you throw that in with 20 or 30 other organizations that may be contributing millions of dollars, your rate of return is going to be greater because you're going to have a diversified portfolio. That rate of return is reflected in this report. We call it a discount rate or an interest funding rate. There's an inverse relationship between what you're earning on your funds to the liabilities that we calculate. And right now we're using 4%. So if you can get this into like a pension type of trust, you're probably going to be looking at yields of 7 to 8%. And so that's going to drop this liability significantly. So that's a step in the right direction when you move that way. So with that said, if I were going to tell you how much money to put aside this year, I'd say $15.7 million would be a good start. But the other thing that I would say too is, one of the things that Ken in the business office asked us to do was to do an analysis if there was a funding, what the liabilities would look like. And if you want to look at page 28 for me, you can see that if we were to use a higher discount rate, our liabilities come down roughly in half. And so we're still looking at a significant annual required contribution but I think you could probably reduce it by half. That's a lot of money, though. I don't know where it's going to come from. I mean, I would assume that the city here is no different than any of the other municipalities that I deal with. And so that's the hard part with respect to these OPEB benefits, and it's the hard part with respect to the accounting regulation. But one of the things that I think is important to recognize is that the accounting profession said, do this, and there was a reason for it. And they said to do this because it's going to create some visibility. It may show cities and municipalities that they're giving away a benefit that they really can't afford to give away. When they started, when municipalities gave this away, health insurance was hundreds of dollars or less per year, and it was a very insignificant cost. And so it was a retention benefit that they threw around like lollipops, for lack of a better word. Now it's significant. We know it's got double-digit inflation. I can't remember the last time that health insurance didn't go up by 10 or more percent, and over the last 20 or 30 years. And so that magnifies the impact of the benefits that have been given away by the city. So they may not be sustainable. And if municipalities follow the private sector, companies like GE, where I used to work and I learned my OPEB techniques, they basically curtailed it. To ask, how much money should you put into a trust? And I say 15 million, and you say, we have 200,000. It doesn't, the numbers are so far off that it almost the do-nothing approach makes just as much sense.
Thank you.
If you hire a uniformed employee right now, and they're 25 years old, this happened to be the first guy that I looked at in my analysis when I looked at the city, you're committing the city to $524,000 of retirement benefit. And that factors in all of the probabilities. Maybe the guy won't make it to retirement, maybe he'll quit, maybe he'll retire at a later age, maybe he'll die. I mean, the different factors that we take into consideration. So of that $524,000, $290,000 of it is for their spouse. So there's another area that maybe you could take the benefits from the spouse. That entire liability of $524,000 is broken up into a $341,000 piece for pre-65. So if we could stretch the retirement age, which we're seeing more and more with uniformed employees, it's not uncommon to see them be asked to work to age 55. And that could shrink that liability significantly. And then the post-65 piece is $182,000. So if you look at it in the stages, if we got rid of the spouse, we save $300,000. If we got rid of the post-65 benefits, we save about $200,000. And if we can narrow the retirement window, we could save another $150,000 just for one employee. So when you're making that decision in the city to hire somebody and you're saying to the fireman, you're getting $45,000 or whatever, you're also saying to yourself, and probably not really addressing it consciously, that we're just put ourselves on the hook for $500,000. So I don't know how many folks you hire every year, and I'm not picking on the uniformed employees. I'm just pointing that out because that's one of your more significant areas. You see benefits that range all over the spectrum. A lot of the organizations that I deal with in New York, the maximum that they're going with is 50% for the individual, 65% for the spouse. So they blend it a little bit. So folks that have a spouse into retirement, they pay a little bit more. So it's kind of arbitrary.
So on a single plan in New York, you're seeing a 50% copay, and on a family plan, you're seeing a 65% copay?
Correct. It's not universal, but those are some of the higher figures that you see. You don't normally see more than that.
And how long has that been around that you're seeing that in New York?
Since the beginning of GASB 45, I've been seeing that. So, it's important to know, and I'll say this, I can't recall a single organization really that's moved the dial significantly with respect to getting contributions from future retirees. They're not really doing it, and I'm a little bit perplexed as to why. I've got a couple hundred organizations that we do this service for, and if I would say maybe 4 of them have dialed it back, and in some instances, to my surprise, they've actually given more benefits away. So it's all over the board.
It's all who had said that the school department's unfunded liability for healthcare is $54 million,
Yes,
And is that because they cut off benefits at age 65?
that's it in a nutshell, plus the non-teaching employees have to work to age 62, so the window is very narrow.
It's smaller.
It's 3 years.
And that the accrued unfunded liability for just the municipal side is 263 million, but you're saying we're reporting 93 million. Can you distinguish for us in layman's terms what we're doing and how that benefits us by claiming that it's less than it actually is?
Sure. You know, the accounting profession is sensitive to massive disruption in the reporting cycles. And so one of the things when they penned out GASB 45, and it's going to be different in GASB 75, but one of the things they said was there's a recognition period of up to 30 years. And so right now, on the 30-year cycle, you've recognized $93 million worth of that 263 million. Now that 263 is going to grow every year because we're continuing to accrue for the folks that are active and another year of service, and then we amortize that. So it's an amortization figure. GASB 75, which is going to be effective for this, the fiscal year that ends 2019, will require you to put 100% of that UAAL on the face of your financial statements.
And that's going to be 263.
Correct. If we were to do it today, it's going to be larger.
Right.
But if we did it today, that's what the number would be. So there's a variety of factors that come into play when we come up with an inflation expectation. So.
The ARC contribution that you talked about, 23 million, and the increases, we always have a debate among everybody in the city as to funding an ARC contribution. And obviously you're talking about in this year's budget funding a $23 million ARC contribution. We just raised taxes this year, and Ernie can correct me if I'm wrong, but we can only go to a maximum 4% by state law. I think our increase was around 3%, and we raised about $4.7 million. So for us to accomplish our goal and fund an ARC contribution, that would have taken us the next 4 or 5 years just taking every dime that we got from our tax increase this year. And we had a fiscal deficit this year where we used $3 million. We didn't even have enough money to pay our bills. We took it out of our savings account. So at some point in time, there's going to be a point where we can't afford to pay our debts, and there's going to, because we can't generate enough income if we haven't already reached it now. So the next question becomes, when do you get to that bell curve where, okay, maybe it's year 2016, 17, 18, 19, where you can't afford to pay the increase in your electric bill, and it starts coming down because, there's only so much you can do to raise revenue and take out of your savings account, and then at some point in time, everybody's going to realize, oh no, we should have done something. And I'm the one that always says, if we don't solve it, the courts are going to solve it. So it's either going to be a bankruptcy court or a receiver. And then everybody can throw a coin in the air as to where they're going to land. But how do we figure out when that breaking point is with regard to expenses and debts and income? Because we all know our required annual contribution. And everybody, with regard to the pension, say we're fine, we're making our annual required contribution. We're not even coming close here. And matter of fact, I think in your report, on the short form report, you said 200,000 is immaterial if we had put it in. So is your company capable of figuring out when we're not going to be able to pay the electric bill? And, you know, I mean, there must be an actuarial formula, and obviously there comes a breaking point where you have to reduce benefits, reduce employees, reduce raises. I think next Wednesday, you know, everybody's going to get a raise. So again, we're going to lie to everybody, tell them that you're all set. But is there a way to figure that out? Because, you know, I think that a lot of people hope that, hey, I've reached retirement, I'm out of here. What have you seen in the private sector with regard to that? I mean, in the public sector, sorry.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of questions in that, and it's also a pretty decent statement, what you're saying. We could help you do projections and kind of come up with a solvency formula for you. That's not a problem. I would also think that the folks in your business office are capable of doing that as well. Have you hit that point? When you have a $24 million cost and you can only pay $7 million, I think your answer is there, honestly. I think we're there. I think we've been there for a long time.
So we're insolvent enough where we could be in bankruptcy or receivership now?
I don't want to say that, but if I was running this business, and I don't know what you do, but if you were running a business in the private sector.
I'm an attorney and I run my own business.
Do you give your employees post-employment health insurance? Exactly. So, I mean, if I was running if this was my business model, I would run away from it. That, you know, the way these benefits are growing, and you're saying you have a 4% threshold, right? And health insurance notoriously is double digit. It's only a matter of time before that's claiming other resources that you need in other places. And a lot of states have issued property tax caps, and I don't think they really considered reality from the perspective of operating the municipality. They're looking at it more from a taxpayer basis.
Yep. I mean, I think you're right on there, because we take it from everything else but our contractual obligations. Mm-hmm. So far, our contractual obligations have been met, except for our pension obligations. So there is a way to calculate at some point.
The breaking point?
Yeah, the breaking point, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, in my opinion, it's simple math. I mean, you got a 4% growth. I mean, you factor in what might come into the economy, what might go out. I mean, a lot of that 4% is all, and you know, when you look at it, it's all based on good days, not bad days. So, you know, factor in the ups and downs in the economy and the revenue stream. It's just simple math.
Thank you.
You're welcome. $5 million. And I think it's significant.